Margaret scoffed. "This neighborhood isn't for your kind." Marcus's jaw tightened. "My kind." She looked away, but the damage was already done. She called 911 on a black man. What he uncovered about her shocked the whole neighborhood. It was a quiet afternoon on Evergreen Lane, the kind Margaret Wilkins enjoyed best. Sitting by her window with a glass of iced tea, she kept an eye on the neighborhood, just as she did every day. She wasn't nosy, just vigilant. She liked to know who belonged and who didn't. That's when she saw him, that a black man in a gray SUV, pulling into the driveway of a house 3 doors down. It used to belong to the Lawsons, but they had moved out 6 months ago. As far as Margaret knew, no one had bought it yet. She leaned in, narrowing her eyes as he stepped out of the car. No delivery uniform, no clipboard, just jeans, a navy sweater, and an unhurried, confident demeanor, like he had every right to be there. But Margaret wasn't convinced. He popped open the trunk, grabbed a couple of boxes, and carried them to the front door. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Was he with a realtor? A contractor? There hadn't been a for sale sign in weeks. Then she saw it. He pulled out a key. At Margaret's heart pounded as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. Her thumb hovered over the screen. It's not about race, she told herself. It's about safety. What if he was squatting? What if he was breaking in? Evergreen Lane was a peaceful neighborhood, and she wasn't about to let that change. So she did what she thought any responsible neighbor would do. She dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Margaret took a breath, her eyes locked on the house. Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person. A man just entered a vacant home, and I don't think he's supposed to be there. Can you describe the individual? Margaret hesitated for just a second. Black male, medium build, gray SUV. He used a key to go inside. A pause. So he used a key? Yes, she said quickly, but the house has been empty for months. I don't know if he's supposed to have it. We'll send an officer to check it out. Margaret exhaled, feeling satisfied. She wasn't accusing him of anything, just making sure everything was in order. That's what good neighbors do, right? Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. A police cruiser pulled up, blocking the SUV. 2 officers stepped out, hands near their belts. Margaret's pulse quickened as the man walked out of the house. He looked confused, raising his hands slightly as he spoke to the officers. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the shift in their posture. One of them took out a set of papers, glanced at them, then nodded. Within minutes, they relaxed. They weren't arresting him. They weren't even questioning him anymore. Margaret's stomach dropped. Had she made a mistake? She needed to know what was happening. Margaret stepped outside, pretending to check her mailbox, close enough to listen, but not too obvious. One of the officers turned to her. "Ma'am." She forced a polite smile. "I called. I saw this man enter the house, and I was concerned. The property's been vacant for months." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, this is Daniel Carter. He's the new owner. He moved in today." Margaret blinked. "What?" The man, Daniel Carter, exhaled sharply. "Yeah, I live here." His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Controlled. Frustrated. Margaret opened her mouth, then shut it. She gestured toward the house. But there was no moving truck. No one in the neighborhood knew. Daniel let out a dry laugh. "Didn't realize I needed to run my plans by the neighborhood committee." The officer turned to Margaret. He provided paperwork. Title, mortgage, ID. Everything checks out. There was no break-in. No crime. Just misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Margaret felt her face burn. Daniel folded his arms. "You assumed I didn't belong." Margaret stiffened. "That's not what I said." Daniel's gaze was steady. "You didn't have to." The officer sighed. "In the future, ma'am, I'd suggest talking to your neighbors before calling us." Margaret clenched her jaw. Was that a warning? As the officers walked away, she turned to leave, but Daniel spoke again. "Funny thing," he tilted his head. "You saw me enter my home, but you never noticed I saw you first." Margaret froze. Slowly, she turned back. Daniel watched her, a knowing look in his eyes. "You've been watching me, haven't you?"